Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I appreciate it. I am really excited and looking forward to the conversation that we have planned with you all this evening, and some really phenomenal speakers who are just really incredible, and we thank them so much for taking some time out of their evening today to share with us. Sarah Owsley, I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director here at Empower Missouri, a role I very much enjoy, and I'm thrilled to get to participate in our policy work that we do here at Empower, and lead lots of types of campaigns for change, for social change, and systems and policy change. For those of you who have followed our work for a while, you know that we have been deeply invested in a fight for clean slate legislation here in the state of Missouri, and this is part of that work. We have led coalitions in various spaces around for clean slate in the state of Missouri. And one of those groups is presenting tonight that I have had the joy and pleasure of leading, criminal justice task force, and our faith-based leaders group who are working on the clean slate legislation. It is the evening of a very busy week in the Missouri legislature, which I really thought they will have sort of wrapped by now. So you'll just have to bear with me as my brain is a little fuzzy come 6 o'clock in the middle of the week. So I have, first I want to thank all of our sponsors. These are organizations and groups that have been connected to our faith-based leaders. If you are a person who would identify with wanting to be engaged in that table, please reach out to me. My email address is sarah@empowermissouri.org, and I'll make sure it's in the chat box as well. These are just a few of the organizations that have deeply invested with us in that work, and represent tonight as well with the excellent slate of speakers that we have for all of you. Many of you might hear me say clean slate and have no sort of idea about what. And so this is a movement across the country, something we're trying to do here in the state of Missouri to automate the expungement process, making it accessible to all of those who need it. And so I often get questions like, what is expungement and why do we need to automate that process? So I think those are very great questions, and I'd love to answer them. Invite our speakers on to chat through their experiences. So we're going to do that. Then here's a really lovely slate of folks who are going to share the things that they know, which are much deeper and better than the things that I will have to share with you. At the end, we'll have an opportunity to ask our panelists some questions, get into their stories a little bit more. We're going to ask you to put those questions in the chat box while they are all presenting, and then we will bring those questions to them at the end of our evening together. So expungement is the process of clearing past criminal convictions from someone's record. This is important because employers, landlords, personal gyms, lots of places run background checks on individuals to find out whether or not they should be granted access to whatever space they control. That often means not being offered a job they might be well qualified for because of a past criminal conviction. It means not having access to housing in communities of their choice, whether or not they can afford it, strictly based off of what has happened in their past. There are all sorts of reasons and things that folks are held back from with these past convictions that usually have nothing to do with the kind of people that they are today, or the type of neighbor they would be, the type of employee they would be. There is really not good data to support the idea that we should penalize people who have had past infractions forever and keep them from various spaces. So it's important to recognize that most folks nationally who have criminal records serve their time in prison or jail, and then they come home. 95% of people come home. Very few folks end up serving very, very long life sentences. And so when they come home, they need to be able to reintegrate back into society. That helps to lower recidivism rates. It helps to reinstill their own self-worth, their own dignity as individuals, and help them to reintegrate as community members. That makes sense from a crime prevention standpoint, because it significantly reduces recidivism, and from a good neighborly standpoint. And as some of our speakers tonight, it makes sense from a faith-based standpoint, to offer that true second chance to people who really need it. This is a really conversation for us to have in the state of Missouri, because over 1.9 million people who live here have criminal records. That's almost half of the adults who live in our state have these past criminal records. There's a sort of falsehood, right, that's just other people who have done things like that, instead of the fact that it really is probably literally one of your next door neighbors. And so, we need to have a broad conversation about expungement and about the importance and life-changing nature of expungement. Folks after expungement are offered new and better jobs. They secure safer and more accessible housing. They are more integrated into their communities, into volunteer positions across the country. Income raises an average of 22% in that first year. So if we really want to talk about how we help folks move past their, past records, expungement is an important piece of that. And the automated question, right? Like, why automated? Why clean slate? Is that in the state of Missouri, this is not national, this is a state of Missouri stat, less than 1% of the people who qualify for expungement will ever be able to get it. And it's not necessarily a policy issue. We actually have really broad policy around who is eligible for expungement and what kinds of and types of crimes are eligible. We actually have pretty decent policies around it. The issue is that we have what is called a petition-based process, which means an individual who has a record has to hire a lawyer. They have to go to court. They usually are in the same court where they were sentenced to begin with. So they are re-traumatizing and experiencing that point in their past again. It's not one court date. It's often many court dates, multiple court dates, 6 to 10 sometimes. So this is 6 to 10 days that they need to take off of work. There's all kinds of data that does absolutely nothing to make that process any easier, nor does it make our communities any safer. Empower Missouri always works on evidence-based practices, and there is no data at all to support this idea that these long-time punishments for past crimes do anything to reduce recidivism. And in fact, we see that it increases recidivism, because if you have done all of these things to change your life and change the world around you, and you still can't get a gym pass to a 24-hour gym because of a past criminal record that has nothing to do with the person you are now, why would, it's so difficult to want to keep working, right? To try to do well. So expungement is an anti-crime policy, and automating that expungement process makes it accessible for everyone in our state who needs it, which is everyone who has a past crime that is eligible at this point. Everyone needs it. So that clean slate legislation, that's our goal, to automate that process, make it so that truly everyone who needs it is able to access it and able to enjoy that real second chance, especially folks in our communities with very low incomes, folks in our communities who are parenting, often folks who have these past criminal records. So I am going to stop talking for a while for you all, and instead invite some of our really slate of wonderful speakers to share their experience, to share what brought them here tonight, and kind of how they view the expungement process. Our first leader is Rabbi Doug Alpert. Rabbi Alpert leads Congregation Kol Ami in Kansas City, a lifelong resident here. Doug completed his rabbinic studies at the Academy for Jewish Religion in Riverdale and was ordained in May of 2012. Doug is the immediate past president of Missouri Healthcare for All, faith co-chair of Missouri Jobs with Justice, vice president of Missouri Faith Voices, an executive committee member for the Missouri NAACP, past co-chair of the Criminal Task Force Criminal Justice Task Force for More Squared, which is the Metro Organization for Racial and Economic Equity, and where I met Doug many years ago, and a faith leader for Stand Up KC. So Doug, thank you so much for joining us, and take it away.
Sarah, thank you. Thank you, Empower Missouri, for organizing this important town hall and for all you do to work for justice. I need to start out with an apology, which is I cannot stay for the entire program. I've got something else that I have to attend, which only says that the quantity of injustice that's going on right now, the severity, demands a lot of attention and a lot of work from all of us. That said, I think my contact information is going to get posted later on. So if you have any questions regarding anything I said, questions, comments, issues with it, feel free to contact me. My presentation, it may come off as a bit academic, but hopefully you'll see that it is going somewhere. and that, you know, by the end, you'll see why from a Jewish standpoint, which is what I've been asked to speak to, is how my own faith leads me to this place and to fight for a clean slate. Hopefully you'll understand. So I kind of begin with the broadest and the earliest, which is our sacred texts, our written Torah, Bible, Deuteronomy, which says in Hebrew, tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, which we translated, which is most commonly translated as justice, justice you shall pursue. But that's a bit of a misnomer, I think. I think a better way to interpret it is to pursue absolute justice. And if you dig down behind that, what that really means, it's not some amorphous idea of a just world. It's you should establish a system of justice which is just. You should have fair judges. You should have police that don't do racial profiling and shoot black kids. And that includes the administration of justice for people who have been sent to prison, who've been convicted of crimes, and then get back and done their time and get back out. We don't want to stop our pursuit of justice at prison. So with that, there's another piece of what I would call Jewish sacred text known as the Talmud, which came out, depending on who you ask, somewhere around the year 500 of what we call the Common Era, what you may know as AD. And these are early rabbis' discussions on any and all aspects of life, and not just Jewish ritual life or Jewish holidays, but everything. Everyday relationships, business practice, and a system of justice. And so it's not so much about what we think, but it's really about how we think and how we approach problems. And in that regard, you'll have these incredibly lengthy discussions about any given topic where the rabbis, the sages of the Talmud, would try to anticipate every possible scenario to determine how to arrive at a just result. So when it comes to the need for expungement, to clear records of those who've previously been convicted of a crime, there are so many scenarios where not expunging criminal records are an injustice. And so to list some of those scenarios, I think is important as to why expungement is both just, fair, needed, critical. One, and maybe the most obvious, is structural racism. There's racial disparity in convictions for the same crime. There's racial disparity in sentencing. Certainly Black Americans, African Americans, Latinx receive more severe punishment even for minor infractions. The nexus between poverty, which disproportionately impacts people of color, Black and Brown Americans, and it impacts access to resources needed to defend oneself when accused of a crime. And with poverty, those resources aren't available. There's the school to prison pipeline. And for purposes of tonight in particular, I would add the school to prison to post-prison ongoing pipeline. It's an ongoing imprisonment. But it starts in the schools where Black kids receive suspension and expulsions for amorphous infractions such as not respecting their teachers or talking too much in class. It's a system that puts kids on a path to prison. It's an unjust system designed to permanently marginalize Black and brown Americans. So that's one scenario with a number of subsets. But another scenario of injustice is that so many are just wrongly convicted. We live in a highly imperfect system of justice that victimizes Black and brown Americans more. And in Kansas City, if you've been around in Kansas City for a while, you are fully aware of the Lamont McIntyre case. Someone who was accused of murder by a corrupt police officer who used to extort sexual favors from Black women, used the power of his position to pressure one woman to testify as an eyewitness against Lamont McIntyre. She later recounted her eyewitness testimony, but to no avail. It was about a corrupt prosecutor who withheld evidence that would have exonerated Lamont McIntyre. It was about a corrupt judge who just happened to have a relationship with the prosecutor, which was not disclosed. All of this put Lamont McIntyre in prison for 24 years for a crime he did not commit. And that's the one we know about. That's there are so many that are wrongfully imprisoned that even after decades don't get out. All this before we get into the difference in recidivism rates for the few fortunate people whose criminal records are expunged. It's not been that long ago when we in Kansas City got our city council to pass what is known as ban the box. It's sort of a kind of a micro version of expungement. And Sarah kind of alluded to it earlier. So the box is the box that one needed to check off on either an employment application or application to rent an apartment that said they had previously committed a crime. So if you had to check off that box, then your employment application got thrown in the trash. There's no way you were going to get to the next step in leasing an apartment and getting a roof over your head. But without that box, you do get to the next step. You get your interview, and then people get to know you, and you have a far better chance of getting hired. You have a far better chance of getting that apartment or that house that you wanted to rent and have a roof over your head. So with those things in mind, those injustices in mind, I wanted to kind of focus to kind of complete my remarks on two other Jewish values or concepts that impact my own perspective on expungement and clean slate. The first is something that we know in Hebrew. It's the Hebrew expression is teshuvah, which means repentance. And we hold it is a foundational piece in Judaism that we have the opportunity to repent, to make up for past wrongdoing. It is a core Jewish principle. We have a holiday that's completely focused on repentance, Yom Kippur, a day of fasting, a day of prayer in the synagogue. And it's built around the idea that we can make up for past wrongdoings and turn our lives around. And yeah, we have this one day a year, but the truth is we pray for it every day. We have a blessing that blesses God who welcomes repentance. And then the very next prayer is a prayer that blesses God who forgives abundantly. So we are essentially commanded to forgive and forgive abundantly. And without expungement, that forgiveness doesn't take place. Literally, the word teshuvah, this Hebrew word for repentance, comes from a three-letter root, shuv, which means to turn. It is in this context that when one repents, one just doesn't apologize, but they turn their behavior around. They turn 180 degrees from wrongdoing to good behavior. And we are obligated to give people that opportunity, and without expungement, they don't have that opportunity. It's an opportunity to turn your behavior, an opportunity to connect with God, and it's an opportunity to replace hopelessness with hope for someone's future. The other Jewish concept is one that's known in Hebrew as Onattabarim. It literally means words of oppression or things that oppress. And it comes up in a wide variety of circumstances. The connective piece to all those different circumstances is that it prohibits situations in which those who are advantaged over another or who have power over others use that power to diminish someone else. More specifically, it is a sin to remind someone who had previously committed a sin, but have corrected their behavior that they had previously committed a sin. Without expungement or clean slate, it is the persistent reminder that they once had committed the sin. You can't hold it over someone who had previously committed a crime and had done their time and changed their lives that they had one time been a criminal. So it's with that that I say thank you for this opportunity to share my perspective, and I thank you all for your important work for Clean Slate and for justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. I appreciate it. Sorry to see you go, but no, you are very important, doing lots of great work around the country, really. So appreciate you making some time for us tonight.
Oh, thank you all.
Yeah. Tom Casey is our next speaker. Tom was appointed Executive Director of the Criminal Ministries in July 2020. He holds a bachelor's in philosophy from Loyola University Chicago and an MBA with a concentration in nonprofit management from Boston University. Prior to joining CJM, he served as Vice President of Operations for Boys Hope, Girls Hope Network, network headquarters in St. Louis. I can read, I promise, where he enjoyed 20 years in a variety of leadership roles. Tom, thanks so much for joining us. Take it away.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you again to Empower and all the other sponsors for this event. Thank you all for attending and being here this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to both speak about the work of Criminal Justice Ministry and this important effort to pass Clean Slate in Missouri. So let me start. I'm going to talk a little about Criminal Justice Ministry and our work that we do and kind of tie it into why expungement is important for us and the clients that we serve, and then lead into some of the perspective, particularly of the Catholic faith. So since 1979, Criminal Justice Ministry has responded to the gospel call, I was imprisoned and you visited me. We were initially developed as a ministry of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul to begin to encourage people to go out and do jail and prison ministry, to visit those who were incarcerated. We, since 2013, have been an independent nonprofit organization affiliated with the Catholic Church. Our mission is to improve our communities by supporting and empowering those who are impacted by incarceration. We have a vision to reduce incarceration and eliminate recidivism. Today, Criminal Justice Ministry continues to support prison and jail ministry to those who are incarcerated. But we've also expanded, and we try to assist the thousands of formerly incarcerated who remained imprisoned, in a sense, by poverty, by addiction, by homelessness, and by a cycle of reincarceration due to often lack of access to housing, employment, and other opportunities because of their criminal record. In addition to our ministry within prisons, our First Services program provides immediate emergency support in the form of food, clothing, bus passes, assistance in getting identification, and other material aid to the many who leave prison or jail with only the clothes on their back. The majority of the hundreds of people we encounter who are exiting jail or prison are homeless or housing insecure, which means that they really have no permanent place to live. They may be staying with relatives or a friend. In the early 2000s, we created our first reentry housing program called Release to Rent. Today, we have a little over 70 people living in our housing program. This is men, women, and veterans enrolled in the program. Our program is a housing first approach, meaning we start by placing people into a safe home, give them a safe place to live, and allow them then to focus on all the other aspects of reintegration and reentry into society, such as dealing with any addiction issues, mental health issues, beginning to focus on employment and restoring relationships. Our model provides a fully furnished one-bedroom apartment. Clients pay no rent in the first 3 months. They start paying 10% after 3 months of their rent and utilities. This allows them the opportunity to save some money and begin to focus on having a nest egg and some resources themselves as they focus on becoming independent. Graduates of our Release to Rent program have a much lower recidivism rate than the state average. My belief, our belief is that it is because we give them access to safe housing and assist them with getting employment and deal with the barriers that many face. We know through our experience with our clients, including those with histories of violent crimes or sexual offenses, that they are good tenants and good employees. Unfortunately, for many people with a record, they're never given a chance to prove what good tenants and good employees they can be, because they're automatically rejected based on policies that say if you have a record, you can't work here, you can't live here. So my role tonight was to speak about the Clean Slate Initiative and expungement from the perspective of a faith-based organization, one that's affiliated with the Catholic Church. I'm not a member of the clergy, and so I'm going to rely heavily on some of the words of the Catholic bishops. There was a pastoral statement back in 2000 that was called Responsibility, Rehabilitation, and Restoration, a Catholic Perspective on Crime and Criminal Justice. So I'm going to borrow a lot from them in terms of trying to describe official church positions on things, but I'll also talk a little bit about just from our experience of criminal justice ministry. In their statement from 2000, the bishop says, a Catholic approach begins with the recognition that the dignity of the human person applies to both victim and offender. The fundamental starting point for all Catholic social teaching is the defense of human life and dignity. Every human person is created in the image and likeness of God and has an inviolable dignity, value, and worth, regardless of race, gender, class, or other human characteristics. Therefore, both the most wounded victim and the most callous criminal retain their humanity. All are created in the image of God and possess a dignity, value, and worth that must be recognized, promoted, safeguarded, and defended. So as Christians, I think we're asked to see Jesus' face in everyone, including the victims and including offenders. And that requires a certain response from us. As an organization, CJM's values are our belief that we're called by Jesus' example to honor the dignity of those who are marginalized in our society, and that we seek to serve, not to judge. In its work, we say that we treat all with Jesus' inclusive message of love, forgiveness, and individual dignity. We believe as an organization that formerly incarcerated are among the most marginalized in our society, and they often have limited options to avoid cycles of repeated homelessness, drug or alcohol abuse, incarceration, and a high risk of early death. The bishops observed that our society seems to prefer punishment to rehabilitation and retribution to restoration, thereby indicating a failure as a society to recognize prisoners as human beings. At CJM, we see that many people who encounter the criminal justice system are from vulnerable populations already, as the rabbi talked about. They're characterized by low socioeconomic status, limited education. They may have mental health conditions or suffer from chronic substance abuse problems. We also observe that many of the people we work with who are coming out of the system are veterans, and that the poor and people of color are disproportionately represented in those who are involved in the justice system. We believe that for anyone involved in the system to have an opportunity for redemption and reintegration with society, that they must have access to employment and housing, basic human rights. For them to have a prospect of a better life, to improve over time, they also need options to pursue better jobs and better housing, and not to be relegated to low wage jobs and lower quality housing in marginalized neighborhoods. If they are to support themselves and their families, they should not be permanently barred from opportunities. Unfortunately, as we know, a criminal record is often a life sentence to be denied access to housing, to be denied access to certain employment, and to be denied the ability to live freely in our society. And that's regardless of whether the person presents any risk to society at all. The Catholic Church believes in responsibility, accountability, and legitimate punishment. Those who harm others or damage property must be held accountable for the hurt they've caused. The community has a right to establish and enforce laws that protect people and advance the common good. So this we agree with. But we also do not give up on those who violate the laws. We believe that both the victims and offenders are children of God. Despite the very different claims on our society, their lives and dignity should be protected and respected. We should seek justice, not vengeance. We believe punishment must have clear purpose. It should protect society, and it should rehabilitate those who violate the law. Our church supports models of restorative justice that seek to address crimes in terms of harm done to victims and communities. We therefore believe that the lifetime collateral consequences of having a record are not consistent with restorative justice. Jesus rejected punishment for its own sake, noting that we are all sinners. Jesus also rejected revenge and retaliation and was ever hopeful that offenders could transform their lives. And as the rabbi talked about, that idea of turning to embrace God's love. At CJM, we have the mantra to serve, not to judge. We believe it is wrong to judge someone based on the worst thing they've ever done. That is especially true when that action happened a long time ago, while they may have been very young, or perhaps dealing with untreated mental health issues or substance abuse issues. As a compassionate community and believing in a loving God, we do not object to accountability and correction, but we do not support suffering for its own sake or punishment that is not constructive or redemptive in purpose. For those formerly incarcerated who do not present a threat to our community or our safety, who have paid their debt and truly seek to reintegrate with society, allowing the record to be used against them forever seems punitive and vindictive. Maintaining barriers to expungement, as we have in Missouri, where there's high costs and a complicated process, does not seem constructive or redemptive. Within the Catholic tradition, we have the sacrament of penance or reconciliation. This sacrament teaches us that we can take responsibility for a wrongdoing, that we can make amends, that we can receive absolution and forgiveness, and then be welcomed back into the community. Absolution, as I understand it, means you get a clean slate. In maintaining a record and allowing continued consequences to be put on someone based on that record, we deny them the opportunity for absolution and true forgiveness, as the rabbi spoke about in his tradition. Last thing I want to share, in Wisconsin, the Catholic Conference up there submitted testimony in favor of a bill in Wisconsin to expunge certain crimes in their records. And I thought they captured something nice here, so I want to end with that. This is from the testimony they offered. Our Catholic teaching holds that punishment should not be viewed as retribution, but rather as a means of protecting public safety, while also serving as an instrument for the correction of the offender. But for punishment to be an instrument of correction, the offender must be given hope. Pope Francis has spoken often about the importance of hope and acted in ways to convey hope. Twice a month, on Sunday afternoons, he speaks for an hour on the phone with the student inmates at the Center for University Students of the Federal Penitentiary Complex of Azizia in Argentina. This prison for over 30 years has enabled inmates to take courses through the University of Buenos Aires. In 2017, Pope Francis sent the student inmates a video message in which he stated that for punishment to be fruitful, there must be a horizon of hope. Otherwise, it remains closed in on itself and is simply an instrument of torture. It is not fruitful. By making expungement more attainable, we give those with criminal records a horizon of hope. It is this hope that will help them reintegrate into society and enable them to embrace opportunities for advancement. Thank you.
Tom, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Just as a reminder, questions, the rest of our speakers are able to stay a little bit to the end. We'll do a question and answer time with them. You can put that question in the chat box, or just we'll give you an opportunity to speak to folks. Tom, thank you so much for that message. That was great. Our next speaker is Brandon Reed. Brandon is the Housing Intake Coordinator at CJM. He started his journey there as a direct service liaison, now called First Services, providing short-term assistance, including basic essentials to clients. In 2016, Brandon became a case manager, release to rent. In 2018, Brandon began his role as case manager for release to rent, assisting clients who have served long periods of incarceration. Brandon has his degree in criminology from the University of Missouri St. Louis, pursuing his master's degree in social work from Washington University Brown School. Very great social work. Passionate about improving the criminal justice system. When he was asked about why he works at CJM, he explained that the population CJM works with are underserved and marginalized within the community, and he wants to better their condition. Brandon, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much. So first, I want to apologize if there's any interference. I was actually at a meeting with St. Louis County Police Department regarding a very specific issue. So I had to pull over, and I'm at a Starbucks. So if there's interference, I apologize. But the work has to get done, so here I am. So I also work at CJM. I'm not going to be as eloquent as Tom. I'm the wild child at CJM, so you're going to kind of get the truth from me, all right? So I'm a person who has been incarcerated. I have two nonviolent drug convictions that I obtained back in 2009, 2012. I'm still recovering from the collateral consequences that I still recovering from the collateral consequences I have. So more specifically, if anybody's from St. Louis and happened to watch Channel 5 last Friday at 10 o'clock, you would have seen why. Roughly about a month ago, I decided to apply for an apartment, and I have a good credit score. I wanted a dog. My mom just hopped on the call. So she's the one who advised me not to get the dog, but I wanted a dog. And I obtained the application. I went through all the questions, did not fill out any information. I always disclose my felony convictions. And they told me that there's a blanket automatic rejection if you have 100 years, if you have had a felony within 100 years.
Yeah.
I said, that's crazy, so I left out of there, and I said, you know what? No, that's not going to work for me. So, I remember the HUD memo, in fact, it was put out on April 4th, 2016, which specifically outlined this could potentially be discriminatory against Black and brown folks. All right. So we are in the process of moving forward with that legislation kind of on the back end. But I want to approach this topic from an academic standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint. As stated in the previous slides, there's only two real theories from a criminological standpoint that really would support or be in non-support of the clean slate, right? So it would be probably the deterrence theory, right? So having someone have that's on the record would be a deterrent from them to continue to do crime, right? So the suffering of collateral consequences that individuals who become post incarceration experience.
Oh no, he froze for a minute.
Mhm.
Let's give him a second. Sometimes when you're outside, it's just the joys of virtual everything.
He was on a great roll.
I know he really was. He was on fire. That's just how it happens, I think, sometimes. I'll give him another second, see if he can come back on. Otherwise, we'll move to our next speaker and give him a chance to finish what he was going to say in just a minute. All right, we'll let Brandon finish his thought when he is able to join us again. Oh, you're good. Okay, all right, go for it, Brandon. Sorry.
I don't know what happened. Sorry. Things happen. All right. So there's this idea that we're moved kind of past pushing people towards incarceration to more of like diversion courts, which is great, right? I heard the rabbi speak earlier kind of regarding the ban the box. I am not a huge proponent of a ban the box. There is some studies that have been conducted, more specifically, I believe in 2018 or 2016, actually 2018, Texas A&M conducted a study, and it's actually showing ban the box is actually disproportionately affecting African-American men, actually. So now they're just assuming all Black men have felony convictions, right? So it's actually only helping white men. So the ban the box is not what was intended purpose. So it's actually not doing anybody any favors. So that needs to be realigned. I'm not an individual who sits back and just chills when things are done wrongfully. My mother can attest, Tom can certainly attest. And I believe that, my lived experience and my purpose of doing this is to challenge the status quo. Once my story came out, the amount of state legislators that reached out to me to try to get, I know it's campaign season. I'm not an idiot. We're all not idiots. So the amount of people that tried to reach out to me and try to kind of hop on my story was a little bit overwhelming, right? I'm bipartisan. I would say that I'm bipartisan. And I politely shut them down. And I have no intention on bringing them on, because I'm not going to be used as a token. I'm not a huge fan of using my story just publicly, just to continuously share my trauma. I could go into all my prison stories. I could go into all that, but we all have the same experience. My job is to find a solution to what we can do to fix this problem, right? So if you have the opportunity, if anybody on this call has the opportunity to meet with legislators and actively engage in changes these policies, that's what we need to do. It's not stopping at just and I hear all the the theological perspectives. I like those all sound great. I love that. And those are great, but it's not helping people like me, and that's just a reality situation, I'm starting I'm graduate Saturday. Mom, if you're still on here, she's coming in town. So that's why I can officially say I have my BS in criminology because I've completed all my coursework. But I'm starting my MSW program. There is no guarantee that I'll be able to get my licensure once upon graduation. There's absolutely no guarantee. I'm taking a gamble. Now, while she was paying for the most of this, so I'm taking an easier gamble than most, right? Now, I probably will be able to get my licensure, but, Tony Messenger just put out a story today about Chantel Fisher regarding the collateral consequences. This is an individual who is a CEO of a major nonprofit here in St. Louis, who holds LLCSW, who is a professor, who is a friend and a colleague, and people would not, and the state or whoever foster agency would not let her foster children. That is exactly what we're talking about. Now, I'm not eligible to have my stuff expunged because I have 2 of the same cases. I have 2 felony convictions. If anything, I can get 1 done, and I've already tried to go through the process. It's way too expensive. I'm not going to spend $15,000 on something that I can't assure that it's not going to be expunged. I've contacted lawyers. People have given me false hope. It's all those type of things that kind of happen to us. So my main point is all this is these meetings are great, but just remember that you're re-traumatizing everybody if nothing's really actually getting done. So if you have the opportunity as a lawyer, as a legislator, as somebody on a committee, bring us to the forefront. Bring us to because I can give you the real deal. We can give you the real deal. I don't necessarily have to do it. You know what I mean? But that's just the reality of my situation. And moving forward, and I think with CJM specifically, one of the things we do is we serve and we don't judge, right? And that's how we should all be. Right? We should not be judging people based on previous people's actions, right? Because we are all one bad decision away from having a felony. I can assure you of that. And I can assure you everybody on this call has committed a felony. I just happen to get caught. That's the only difference, right? And I was just at the police department having that exact same conversation with those people. We are no different than anybody else. I just happen to be a worse criminal than you all. That's just the reality of the situation, except I continue to suffer these consequences. So in order for these consequences to keep on stopping, we need to spread the word, right? Spread the word to your friends, spread the word to the people that don't believe this, right? And if people challenge it, bring academic knowledge to them. There's plenty of evidence-based theories to support why this would work. If I had the ability to expunge my record, I would never have had this issue with the apartment. I would not have to worry about getting my licensure. I would never have to worry about when I get pulled over, whether or not the cops are going to decide to pull me out of the car just because they see my record. I will never have to worry about going to a job and having to worry, do I have to disclose about my felony conviction now or do I should wait till later? Now, luckily, CJM was one of the only agencies that gave me a chance. And this is why I love CJM and I'll always have hold a dear spot in my heart, is because they took a chance on me. Most people wouldn't take a chance on me just because they saw 2 Class C felony drug convictions. I don't know how much more I have time to talk. Am I over my time?
Yes, you are, but you were off for a minute. So
I'm done.
I appreciate your words.
I'm done.
Brandon, thank you so much for that really call to action, right? I really appreciate that. We sit here and talk about it and feel really good about ourselves when we're done in this hour. We really actually haven't done anything, right? We are building towards systems change. That's what we need as a legislative change to automate this expungement process, broaden the folks who are currently eligible for expungement, because your story is not unique either, right? I have 2 of the same crimes. They were all addicted, it was all linked to addiction. That's a really common story. And so just really appreciate that push, Brandon, so much. Our next speaker is Christine Mcdonald. Christine is an internationally recognized author and speaker known for her unique ability to construct conversations and ignite change for underserved and marginalized populations. Christine has a wide range of life experiences that have positioned her to inform and improve individual and systemic responses to persons who have experienced imprisonment, homelessness, substance abuse, human trafficking, and commercial sexual exploitation, and other complex challenges. Christine, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. I just love what Brandon said. I pursued a degree. I submitted my application to law school at UMKC, almost turned down because I'm a felon, right? There is a residual life sentence. I myself am a person who has experienced incarceration. I have a number of felony convictions from the 90s and early 2000, 2001. Unfortunately, you get arrested for something. Sometimes it takes a while for them to come to court. And we don't always factor in that time frame when we think about how long it was since your conviction versus how long was it since you committed your crime. I was homeless for a very long time. And, our culture that truly has a war on poverty and homelessness. And our criminal justice is strategically positioned to be very aggressive towards people of color and people of poverty. That is the reality when we look at the type of sentencing and the type of people that end up incarcerated in our prison systems. Oddly enough, I actually am waiting to hear if I am going to get any type of expungement. I'm 5 weeks in and I've heard nothing. I think women have a unique thing, and I think, I've worked on advocacy. So I spent about 5.5 years as a program manager when I got an internship out of college after I'd gotten out of prison, and I worked specifically with people that had been incarcerated 10 years or more in assisting them contracted by the state to reintegrate into society. I think my story becomes kind of unique is some of the challenges I faced upon my release. First of all, I don't think we think about how we criminalize the homeless. So right now we're doing some housing first things in several communities to find these solutions. And what happens is we get them these housing vouchers, and unfortunately, we're not just talking about felons now, we're going to talk about municipal, and then I'll move it on up, I promise, because we have this 3 strikes initiative that happened in the war on drugs that let some of these municipal charges become felonies, which was part of my residual consequences. We criminalize the homeless, we arrest them. You were sleeping on the steps, you were loitering. There's these things, and we spend these taxpayers' dollars, right, by arresting them. Well, they're homeless. They're probably not going to show up in court. They're probably not going to pay their tickets. So now we got a bench for it. So now they got two strikes on them, right? And so this cycle that continues to perpetuate this low-lying fruit, if you will, easy targets for charges, it's tragic. I myself was trafficked, so I am a survivor of human trafficking, and I also was an addict. That was part of my residual effects of my trafficking experience, and being arrested for prostitution is a municipal charge. 3 strikes, you're out. It was the Welfare Reform Act, and we kind of adopted some stuff in Missouri. We liked that 3 strikes out kind of thing, and we took some of these municipal charges and we made them felonies. So as a residual effect of my own experience, I became a felon during my trafficking experience. We didn't have the language for that yet. The Trafficking in Persons Act hadn't happened in 2000. Now we're a lot more hesitant to arrest individuals in our state for prostitution, but I have 5 felony prostitution charges and I have 2 drug charges. When I was incarcerated, we were still doing this thing we don't do now, but we did, and that was we were sending individuals back on non-criminal revocations. What did that mean? That meant you got out. If you failed to appear, your parole officer could immediately send you, put out a warrant. You would get arrested. You would go to prison and you'd wait to hear from the parole board and see what they were going to do with it. So if you had a home, if you had a job, you were losing it all. During my non-criminal revocation for failing, I was at work and I didn't make it to my parole office. I was revoked and I went to prison. Lost my job, of course, but during that incarceration, waiting for the parole board to make a decision, I went blind in 3 days. I had a job at Mcdonald's. I was assistant manager. I had a home. I was doing good by everybody's standards as somebody who had come from the past that I had, and for the first time having stability. I went blind in 3 days. When I was released, when the board finally made a decision, and they did not give me a medical release because I was not facing impending death, just blindness, and I couldn't get appropriate medical care. I shortly after had to have both of my eyes medically removed. You don't come back from that. I applied for food stamps, couldn't get them, banned from life. My charges were drug related, banned from life, never got a food stamp. I couldn't get housing. Never got public housing, banned for life. We've changed some of that. There were these residual connotations that could have been tools in my toolbox while I was working to stabilize my life for myself and my unborn child. I am today, like I said, I've pursued a career. I've gotten a degree. I tried to continue on into law school and I was denied. I'm now in seminary, which is great. However, my choices are minimal at best, because not only am I a felon, I'm totally blind, right? And people have some, well, that's a whole different world of discrimination that's not our topic of today, but I kind of have a double whammy. So I wrote a couple books and I thought, well, I'll do this entrepreneur thing since nobody wants to hire me, because most of the jobs available to people like us are like Mcdonald's, are like warehouse, right? I can't get those jobs because I'm blind. I have a degree, and a lot of the places that I apply for won't hire me because they have a policy that says we can't hire you because you're a felon. So I live in a trailer park. Why? Can't make enough money to get a decent apartment to send my kid to a decent school. Statistics say that 3.5 years with stabilization, and that means a job and housing. And I'm not talking from a slumlord housing that's discriminatory, because I've had that, and that's a whole nother story that made the front page of the Kansas City Star a few years ago when a slumlord rented into disgusting housing things. But 3.5 years after somebody that has been incarcerated has a job, economic stability, fair housing, their chances of reoffending are just like somebody like you that is on here that has never committed a crime, committing one for the very first time. We can spend all these taxpayers' dollars on the back end because we go back and reoffend, because I work with people experiencing incarceration today. And what do? They go back, they reoffend because they can't make it on this side. They at least know how to eat from their criminal behaviors. So we either spend this money, these dollars on the front end, and create that 3.5 years of stabilization. We get these people housing first vouchers, and then nobody will rent to them with their housing voucher because they were arrested when they were homeless. What kind of sense does that make? There is no hope. So why try? We already asked people to jump through insurmountable hoops to navigate systems, and the dots aren't always connected. You have to go to one agency to get another thing, to get another agency to help you with another thing. That's daunting for people that are just trying to seek stable. We can do better, and we're called to do better. The Constitution tells us that we are sentenced by a jury of our peers, and we are sentenced. We do that time, and we are then supposed to be able to come back out here. And that is not how our system works. And we can do better. And this is an opportunity. This is a public safety solution. This is a dignity solution. This is rebuilding community and in turn families. This is making us all better and stronger together. And it's just the right thing to do. It's just the right thing to do, because we can pay now and spend some time, right, with forgiveness and expungement and helping people reintegrate. Or guess what? The likelihood of them getting back involved in criminal behavior and going back to prison, where we're paying $26,000 a year in prison to support them, is far more likely. I don't know about you, but today as a taxpayer, even though I am someone who has experienced incarceration and am a convicted felon, I would much rather my dollars go on the front end to create dignity and hope and see them becoming a stronger part of our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Christine. I really appreciate your words and vulnerability today. That is absolutely right. It makes zero sense at all, our current penal system in that regard. So appreciate you calling that to light. Our final speaker tonight is Rob Richardson. Robert is a former biologist for a state environmental regulation agency, living now in Kansas City. He was incarcerated in 2006 for a crime which has substantially changed, and now he would not have been charged. He developed complex PTSD during his 9 years of incarceration. This ability increases the difficulties he faces with a past record. His employment struggles have a documentary Green Cheese Moon. He was also recently in the Star. He's passionate about systems change to support people like him who work hard against long-lasting barriers from past circumstances. Rob, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
I appreciate the invite, Sarah. You're awesome. I was thinking about a few things. There's the faith leaders did such an amazing job of spelling out the moral case for, they were so right, both of them, on almost all the things, and why it is nothing but torture if you're not showing a horizon of forgiveness, if there's not a way out. And what I was thinking about, speaking about from the beginning was, I remember somebody made a joke when I was working at the Department of Environment about inmates tattooing their faces. Why would you do that? That's so silly. You're showing them on the outside. And when I got inside it, I started working as a law clerk, helping people with their cases. So I got to listen to a lot of guys. And what I found out was they wear those because they know once you're in that system, it is forever. You have been cast out of good society and all the privileges therewith. It's a bubble. And I don't mean any disrespect to anyone here at the panel, but we're all a bunch of white liberals feeling good about trying to fight for the right thing. And that's just frankly not what motivates most people. They see us as terrifying, we'll get them over there, away from the good folks. When in reality, it is your neighbor. It is you if you had just turned left instead of right that day. The reason the guys tattoo their faces is the knowledge that they will never go back and they might as well wear it on the surface. Just like Brandon was talking about, the ban the box. It's a wonderful idea. I get asked about it all the time and I have to give the same answer. Cool, that means I just get to see his face when he discriminates against me.
Yep.
When I tell him I'm a felon, I get to look at that, the look in his eyes go cold. And nope, I'm not getting whatever it is I'm asking for. Is it the job? But I'm here to talk about, I'd like to be a biologist again. See, I was incarcerated for 9 years, and in the time I was in, even though I have a degree, I would have pretty much had to go back for a second degree or an advanced degree to get anything like caught up with the current state of the field of biological sciences. Except I had student debt. And then on top of which had, of course, gone into, while I was incarcerated, I now owe tens of thousands more than I did. On top of that is what the state charged me for the privilege of being paroled. Every month, a new tick, and now I owe thousands and thousands of dollars to the state. Even though they told me when I went on disability that it would be wiped, they only meant from the day of disability onward. I'm still charged for everything before the federal government said. So in effect, if I ever want to go back to being a productive member of society in that field, assuming I won't be discriminated against, I would have to pay first the state of Missouri, then the banks that hold my loans, and then try to apply for some other school. Hey, maybe I'm qualified for a grad school somewhere. I don't even know. There's not even a point in me looking right now. And every single guy in prison, whether they're a college person or not, feels that way. What is even the point when I get out? I'm going to be denied everything. The only thing I know how to do is go back to my old ways. There is no money to be made, but I can hustle. And if you won't let me get out of the bad neighborhoods where all the bad influences are and live somewhere nice and start a new life, if you won't help me climb to the next rung of the ladder, well, I can sure buy a car with what I can sell tonight. Why the word, I wanted to talk about it when Sarah was, if I'd have been right from the very beginning, if I'd have been second speaker. When Sarah was talking about recidivism, what I kept hearing was, I remember reading once about the origin of the word penitentiary. See, faith leaders who set up the prison weren't the kind that we're talking tonight. They were the ones who believed that people were inhabited by demons that made them behave the way they did, and it had to be driven out of them. The cell is the same word used for monks in their cells because you were supposed to be on your knees, penitent, praying to God because you were a broken sinner and it's the only way you could be saved. We know now that if you still treat people like that, especially as in my case where I was put in long-term isolation because I fought my case and they wanted to break me, and they did. They took me off my medications till I almost died, and I finally pled out of fear of my life. That's what Missouri did. And then to get to the system and realize, as horrible as I felt for myself, every single person I met in there had it worse or had the same story. If the guys on the inside can't see a reason to behave tomorrow, a reason not to stab the guy who stole their package of cupcakes or whatever is going on in the prison drama that day, they're certainly not going to see a point in getting out and just to be told no at every opportunity to live. Place I live, the reason they made a documentary about me, the only place I could get here in the city to live, I originally lived 4 hours away from my children because that's the way out in the country, living directly behind my parole officer's building was the only way I could find a place to live. It was nice. I could walk to my parole here meetings in about a minute. But I had to try, I spent almost a year trying to find a place here in the city that would rent to me, because at some point during the conversation, I had to at least let them know, hey, this is going to come up. And it's not even that bad. It's not the point. Once that tone gets into the conversation, but it's every time I almost get pulled over, every time I have complex PTSD from the torture they put me through. Every time I see a speed trap, I have to go home and lay down for a few hours. That's not a joke. That's not I mean, my day is gone. I can't be employed effectively because I can't know that I won't see a police officer cuff someone up and have an attack right there in my office. I don't know. I can't tell a boss I'm going to be there on Thursday. That's true for a lot of us. The guys they keep in solitary, the guys with tattoos on their face who know they're never going home, that's what they do to them every day. Right now, in every prison in Missouri, there are a minimum of 300 to 400 people in solitary confinement going insane. And how are they supposed to find stuff when they get out? How are they supposed to do better? How do you go from what everyone acknowledges is torture but doesn't stop to, oh, here we are in the suburbs. It's not happening. They put them in bed bug infested places. I've lost everything I own twice since getting out because of the conditions of the apartment I was in. Every piece of clothes I had to go. So I don't mean to get down on everybody. I'm glad we're all good-hearted people trying to do the right thing for the right reasons. And to the people who are faith leaders, who talk about forgiveness and who talk about more than that, let these guys earn a new place. Give us, we're not asking you to hand us a nicety. We're asking you to treat us like a human being and reach out like you would to your own brother who fell over. And if these guys who went in and realized they're kicked out of the system actually thought, oh, there's a way I can fight my way back. I know a guy, he went through the whole thing and now he's got his whole freedoms back. He earned it. He did the right and it paid him. That's the guys that won't turn around and go back to selling on the corner. That's the guys who don't fall into a life of despair and fall into a domestic abuse situation because they can't handle hating themselves because everyone else hates them and keeps hating them, keeps telling them they're scum. I heard about how scummy we were almost literally every day I was inside. I came out of my parole officer straight up, scum. It's just like, none of this was what I thought the justice system was before I went down. I had all these lofty ideals from the academy. I understood it. I was a good liberal and I knew that our country was inherently just. And it's just not. This is, God. Sorry, JMO just reminded me of something and she's right. They're right. Sorry, JMO. JMO, thank you for that. They're correct. I actually encountered cops and almost had a breakdown just trying to give my testimony to the legislators who could change the law that put me in the condition I was in. We can't go in to fight for expungement with a lawyer, with a judge. There's no way I could face that, even if I had the cash in hand today and was cleared to do it. I couldn't go through the process and I'm the most likely guy to get it because my crime isn't even really a thing anymore. So how, if I can't do it, could you expect someone else to do it on their own, especially if we're poor, especially if we have all these debts, because we all do. And that's why 1% gets it, because that 1% are the guys who can pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I don't mean to chew anybody's ear. I'm really appreciating that Empowered Missouri is fighting for this. It's the right thing. It has always been the right thing. The reason most of these collateral consequences exist was when the system was used to keep a lot of people in minority heavy communities locked up and then unable to vote. This is all across the South. It's a way to modify who votes in your areas. So there's a lot of opposition you're going to find to trying to let us have all of our rights back just for free. Oh, I wish you all the best.
Yeah. Yeah, Robert, thank you so much for those words. We get a lot of questions, right? We've been talking about this for a year now, more than a year now, and this legislation isn't even going to be sponsored until next year. And we've gotten so many questions that have been like, why aren't you doing something now? And it's entirely because we want to make sure that we have enough folks in Missouri who are educated about the issue, who understand what is happening, who have heard from folks like we've heard from tonight about how these past records stop you from doing things that don't make any sense. Brandon, I thought for sure your story was going to be about how you couldn't adopt a dog from a shelter, because I have seen that happen where a shelter has turned away someone with a conviction from adopting a dog. I thought for sure that's where you were going. Just there are so many things that are just part of our humanity, just part of our being in a community, that we deny folks with records for no reason at all. Like, you know, if you've been locked up for dog fighting or something, like maybe, right? But just any random felony, that makes no sense to help anyone. And there's really no reason anybody ever needs to know anything about that period of your life. And so that's why we are being really careful to make sure that we're talking about this from lots of different places, from lots of different positions. And we can take things like tonight's town hall and continue to change the narrative, change the conversation, and help folks understand that it just isn't as easy as, you know, they shouldn't have done the crime if they didn't want to deal with the time. Like, the time is not their whole life, right? It's not forever and ever. And so being able to really change that conversation is so powerful and important. And thank all of our speakers tonight. I appreciate you and appreciate your continued honesty and vulnerability and conversation with us. We're going to switch over to a little bit of a Q&A time here. There was one question here in the chat box I want to kind of scroll up to, and in large part it's because I am not super educated around the issue here around specifically prison labor. And so Trish, I'm just going to copy the words that you wrote, and if you want to clarify anything, please come off of mute to do so before we let our speakers kind of offer reflections or thoughts. And Trish wrote, forgiveness is important messaging, but who is seeking forgiveness is important. As while I paid my debt to society, from my perspective, those who insisted on the laws should seek forgiveness. The nonprofits who utilize community service or prison labor should seek forgiveness for those actions. And so then she challenged, what have your organizations done to curb community service or prison labor within the nonprofit world? So I'm curious to hear some of our speakers' reflections and experiences.
St. Louis man thinks he's being singled out for his past.
Sorry.
No worries, Brandon. Very good. Thanks so much. So anybody who has any thoughts is invited to kind of come off mute and share their experiences with that. And I can talk a little bit about what Empower Missouri has internally done, though that's not a large portion of our work.
I'll jump in for CJM. I know because at least because I can tell you at least what my organization has done is that in regards to specifically to prison labor, I don't think we've really challenged that. That's more a systemic issue. As someone who personally had to work in the prison, that was mandated to work, that you were forced to work in prison, especially I don't know in Missouri Department of Corrections, at least you are, or you get sent to the hole. And from my perspective, I owed money to the state, so I only got the state tip, which was what, $5.50 at the time or whatever the case it was. So I wasn't able to really do much with it. In fact, I got caught once having money sent to other books. I think from a nonprofit standpoint, I think we've tried to utilize from CJM's perspective at least, is to empower people to obtain jobs. So we do the background work for them, right? So we try to connect people with employers. We are the ones that have the conversations with employers prior to them. We're just ones to advocate. So when they're presented in front of an interview, the employer already has background information so that they're not continuously shamed, as to what Robert was talking about, right? We're talking about ban the box system, where you go in front of them where you already know you're going to not get the job, but now you just get to be shamed in front. We've tried to curb that by talking to employers and try to get them in and trying to tell them that, you know what, like, most of these individuals are going to be better workers than most people coming off the street. And that is, I don't know if that's evidence-based, is there any data to support that, but at least in our program, that's evident. In order for that to happen, you need to provide stable housing. You can't provide, if you don't have stable housing, you're not going to be able to maintain long-term employment, right? So that's at the bottom line. And I know that Christine was talking about housing first, and that housing, and I'm not a huge fan of housing first models, because my second is what's next, what's housing second, what's second, right? What's the second component, right? So I don't know if that really answers the question, because those are a complex questions. So I'm not really exactly sure where you were trying, like what exactly the answer you were looking for, but I can say that here at CJM, Tom can allude to a little bit more, is that we really devote time to really spend time talking to these employers ahead of time, and landlords. And I also want to finish off by saying that not all people are bad, and that I've encountered some great individuals, landlords, employers, and people who have given me a chance. And that's important to recognize, that we're not in a system, that we're not in a vacuum where like everybody hates us. That's not true. And if somebody believes that to be true, that's just not accurate, because I wouldn't be where I'm at today if I didn't have that opportunity. Now I'll let my boss talk, because I know he thinks I do too much. So Tom.
Thanks, Brandon. So I think there's two things you're asking about. One is the as Brandon expressed, the work that you're forced to do while imprisoned, and the compensation you receive for lack of compensation for that work. And then the other piece I think you're asking about is people who are sentenced to community service time as their sentence, and how nonprofits benefit from that, because I think they're required to do their service within a nonprofit setting, or for I don't know if they can do it for a public agency as well. I'm aware, I've had people in different organizations I've worked with where they have come to us and said, I've got to do 100 hours of community service. It's an alternative sentencing. It's instead of going to serve time inside. And so I know that, agencies, in a sense, you benefit to some degree from that, because you are getting that labor. But I think there's also, a side of, is it a benefit to the person? Is it better than a sentence to, serving time? Is that an appropriate punishment, et cetera? To my knowledge, and again, I've only been at CJM almost 2 years now, but I don't believe we've officially taken any actions in that time. And I don't know previously on either of those issues, other than advocating and standing against the idea that people should be exploited based on their conviction.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much for those answers. I appreciate that. I also don't super know a lot about what Empower Missouri has done specific to that issue, though certainly encouraging things like diversion programs that can keep records off of, keep convictions off of folks in the long term, for sure. Though I think it's a really good equity argument to have a conversation around how that happens, and are those folks compensated for that time, or the quality of their work, et cetera, importance, et cetera. So I appreciate that question. Thank you so much. One of the things that Brandon sort of had alluded to was that he may or may not be able to get his social work licensure when he finishes his, oh, Robert, I saw your raised hand. I'm gonna ask this question and then I'll come back to you if that works for you, okay? So I saw Brandon talk a little bit about may or may not be able to get his licensure. Christine talked about not being able to go to law school. I think that these are ways that we continue to dehumanize and really stop people from being able to reach their goals. It disincentivizes them from living the kind of lives that we might be telling them they need to live, right? We're stopping them from being able to invest in their communities, in their own personal lives in a way that's really unfair and harmful. So I'm just curious if any of the other speakers would like to talk to or talk about how they have seen that play out, what they have experienced around that. I am on the advocacy board for the NASW, our state social work affiliation. Yes, and so I will reach out to Brandon. We have done a lot of work to make sure that folks with records are able to get their licensure. I'll tell you, I never got my licensure, but don't tell my social work professors that. But that folks can get their licensure for social work because it is a field that so many people with records are drawn to in a way of like working to change the systems that harm them, right? And so I think that that's really admirable and great. And so I just would love to hear any other thoughts that folks have about that.
I was denied a guide dog. I was turned down for a guide dog because I'm blind, because I'm a felon. I had both my eyes medically removed, so you don't get much blinder than that. But I applied for a guide dog and was turned down because I'm a convicted felon.
From a nonprofit, Christine?
No, I would assume guide dog schools are not for profits, absolutely. And I applied for a guide dog and going through the training at the guide dog school to be able to utilize the dog. And I was literally turned down because I was a convicted felon. So I think that's like ludicrous because I went blind in prison and didn't get appropriate medical care. I spent 17 months in a one-man cell. I mean, I feel like, if I wouldn't have been revoked for a non-criminal revocation by failing to report, I would have gotten medical care and I wouldn't have been blind, first of all, right? And I didn't sign up for blindness. And then, now I'm blind, and I through with my sentencing, of course. And then now I'm trying to get a dog so I can navigate the world around me more independently. And I'm denied because I'm a felon. It's not like I have a crime against a person.
Yeah, it's stories like that, Christine, right? Like, what did they think you're going to train the dog to shoplift or something? Like, why? I just really don't even understand the justification at all for that.
It's ludicrous. And my crimes were in the late 90s and early I was sentenced in 2000. I've been off supervision since 2006. I went blind in 2004. Went blind in 2004, had my eyes removed in 2006, and couldn't get a guide dog, right? I reapplied when I got off supervision and thought that would make a difference, and that did not.
Wow.
Yeah, right? I mean, we're talking, I've almost 20 years off of paper. I haven't even had so much as a traffic stop except for a seatbelt violation. And that was in 2004 in a passenger in a car. And I can't get a guide dog.
We got to get you a guide dog.
Feel fired up about it.
Now I'm on a mission.
I don't know anybody.
I'm gonna get you a guide.
I'm in St. Charles, so
I'm in South City.
I can
so
come
we're
down
close
to your
enough.
office and
We're close enough. I'm gonna get you. We're gonna work on this together, Christine.
and it's just like crazy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't think people think about, just that forever. You know what I'm saying? It is forever. There are residual causations that affect us in creating stable families and creating economic opportunities. And we're just like everybody else. We don't want to rent a slumlord. We want to send our kids to school in a decent neighborhood. We want our kids to go to a different school. And we want our kids to have better opportunities than we had that ended us up in the places that we were. And we're not forged those opportunities. And something like expungement, and which is an absolute nightmare process anyway. It's a bogus false hope, right? So if we could really think about really automatically having these charges dissolved, we're going to be better neighbors. We're going to be bring up better families. So generations will be affected that come behind us. And I don't think people think about that.
I'm
Thank
gonna
you,
catch
Christine.
up, Sarah, real quick,
Sure.
because Starbucks is closing and they're like looking at me all crazy. And I want to answer one of the questions in the chat, because somebody asked what kind of education or advocacy actions on Clean Slate needs to be done. And this is something I think Jeanette was really, really good at, and that's why I admire her work so much, is that put us in front of those committees. I am so tired of seeing the ACLU and all the lawyers and all the people with all these advanced degrees speaking
Yes.
for us. Put
Right?
us in front of it, because trust me, people hear me. They listen to me. I'm loud, I'm obnoxious, and I have no problem knocking on doors. Each legislator, I will go down the hall. So if that's one empowerment action you can give to us, give us a seat at the table and put us in
Yes.
front of those committees. I was recently contacted by Chris Dinkins, who was all very, very interested in my situation, right? And then completely ghosted me. This is a Republican candidate who's sits on the Criminal Justice Committee. From Lisa, that's what she told me. And I told her, unless you can get me in front of a committee, I have no interest in having this discussion with you. It might sound harsh, sorry, Tom, if that wasn't my job duties, but that's the reality, is that place us in the forefront because we can speak for ourselves. And I think we do a far better job than the ACLU and all these other places. So that's my end piece. I don't know if that's appropriate to say, but that's what my goal is. So,
No,
and
that's
Jeanette,
great.
I want to thank you for the work that you've done for the various years. I've never thanked you personally. I've seen you in Jeff City and all types of stuff on Advocacy Day, and you've been an important advocate for us, and I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brandon. Robert, you had raised your hand a while ago, and I asked you to hold off, and now it's your turn. I'm sorry.
Poke the button and it works. All right. It took me a few times. But something Brandon said reminded me. He was talking about state tip. Most of y'all may have no idea what that is. For people who owe anything, every month inmates are paid. And I do use giant air quotes because the amount you're paid, unless you have a job in there, which most of us are required to do, is I think $7.50. Unless you owe the state money, in which case it's $5 even. And that's what you live on for the month. Your soap, your toothpaste, bought at the canteen at what amount to gas station prices. Now, if you do have a job, you can make up to $30 or $40 a month, which goes all of it except that $5 state tip right back to the state. So guys on the inside have absolutely no chance to build anything, to earn anything, to have any kind of cushion when they get out. They deliberately put these expensive fees, and then if you go right back, you're stuck right back with your state tip, living on $5 a month, suffering in there to get out with nothing again. The whole thing is an endless trap financially. If you guys cannot include wiping inmate debts as part of this, it's pointless. There's no point in getting the records cleaned if you can't also do something about that economic loop. Just my final little bit of that. Thank you for reminding me, Brandon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robert and Brandon. Tom, Christine, I want to offer you guys an opportunity to sort of say a last little piece in our 5 minutes before we let folks go.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thanks, Christine. No, great discussion. I think raising so many of the complex issues that are involved here, and the highlighting the ways in which we as a society have adopted policies and practices that were guided by, thoughts of this is what keeps us safe or whatever, that have resulted in these consequences and impact that really run afoul of our core values. And so I think we have a chance here in supporting this change to really right that wrong and make it possible for people who have tremendous gifts and abilities to contribute to society to really have the opportunity to do that. So thanks again all for being here tonight and for listening.
I'm going to co-sign what Brandon said. Nothing about us without us, right? That's why our country is where it is. People have been in places of power and privilege making decisions that affect people that have never experienced what the people they're making decisions about are dealing with, right? We need to be at the table. We need to be at the table. I think when we think about, so I'm with More Square and I've been with them for about 10 years. And so our big push right now is reigniting the information that formerly incarcerated people can vote in Missouri, and our votes matter. As you guys shared earlier at the beginning of this, Sarah, as you shared, there's 1.9 million people that have experienced incarceration that are released into our state right now. Those people can vote. We have to also ensure that we people with lived experience that have experienced incarceration are equipped with knowledge and power that we can research who is in office, who is making the decisions, so that we can ensure and educate those people, the rookies as they're running for candidate, and we get new legislators in to understand some of these issues that they're not. I don't remember Jeanette, and Jeanette was in office back in the day when we were working on lifting the lifetime food stamp ban, and I don't know how many times we would get new people in office and we would be starting all over at ground one. That's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing. If I would have killed somebody, I could have got a food stamp. If I would have raped somebody, I could have got a food stamp. But because I dealt with the disease of addiction, I am banned for life, and now I'm blind, right? And I need those food stamps. And then it was like, I don't need your food stamps, but this isn't okay. We have a thing in recovery, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. We never let an addict get hungry, angry, lonely, tired, right? Because they go out and use, and then now they're committing crimes in our neighborhoods. And so people don't understand. People don't understand the trauma that oftentimes ends people up into this, and people don't understand the laws that were implemented that strategically created a purpose and a way, an avenue to really incarcerate the poor and people of color. And we have to educate our community. And it's not just, groups like us that care about the cause. It's people that don't come to the table that need to hear and be educated as well, so that we can get those votes and so that we can really make changes, because people don't know what they don't know. Right. So it's just important for us to have these conversations, not just amongst ourselves, but with people outside of ourselves that are voting every day. Right. So thanks for everybody for jumping in here.
Yeah, thank you all so much again for joining us and spending some time with us this evening. Christine, thanks for talking about that SNAP food stamp ban. We are absolutely continuing to work on that. JMO pulled that out as well. Christine was instrumental in helping to pass that, who is on our staff. And we had a meeting today with DSS trying to figure out why it is not as effective as it should be and what we can do to make it better.
Right.
So we're continuing to hammer on that issue.
I mean, we passed it in 2015. How
Yes.
come I still got people coming to me saying, nope, they won't give them to me?
Yep. Yeah,
It's crazy. There's some caveats there.
Bureaucratic issue. That's right, for sure. We're working on it. Thank you so much, Christine Mcdonald and Tom Casey, Rob Richardson, and Brandon Reed, and Rabbi Alpert, who had to leave us relatively quickly. There's information there about our website and how to reach us. Again, I would love to speak to anybody that would like to send me an email at sarah@empowermissouri.org. Appreciate all of you so much, and have a really great night.